What's going on, guys? It's your boy, Tom Talk Trash, and Happy New Year. With it now being a new year, I had the thought of looking back at my favourite interviews of the previous year, 2022. But before we get into my top 10, I have an honourable mention, which is my interview with Nick Dinsmore, formerly known as Eugene in the WWE. I think the reason I would rank this interview as an honourable mention is the fact that it was my first wrestler interview, and just there's a lot that I would do to improve it. I really enjoyed it, but there was a lot that I would do to improve it. Here is a clip from that interview.
Once Eugene had the first match and he won, and people realized, this is an underdog story about a boy following his dreams and becoming a WWE superstar, then that story is easy to write for anyone, or easy to lead, because that's what I think everybody has, is a dream to achieve.
Number 10.
Number 10 is my interview with Tom Colohue from the Tom Colohue YouTube channel, and at the time he was a Pro Wrestling Torch contributor. Basically, the reason I rank this interview here is because I really like this interview, and we talk about how being a freelance journalist has affected him, his mental health, and stuff like that. Here, how he got to go freelance, and just things like that, really. But here is a clip from that interview where he talks about how to build your name as a freelance journalist.
There is a difficulty in building your own name when you're starting from absolute scratch. Whereas when I started with PW Torch, he's a PW Torch guy, and it got a little bit of attention. And for example, moments like this where people would reach out and be like, okay, let's talk about this.
Number 9.
Number 9 is my interview with Robert DeFelice from Fightful. I think the reason I ranked this interview and enjoyed this interview, guys, is the fact that it was not a conversation about wrestling. It was a conversation about mental health and cerebral palsy, which is a condition I have, but Robert also has as well. So we had conversations about what being a content creator with cerebral palsy was like, and where we feel like the industry can improve, and things like that, really. Here is a clip from that interview where Robert talks about how Fightful have been so helpful and accommodating with his cerebral palsy.
Almost to the point where like sometimes I wonder if I should be more forthwith about it, because sometimes things will take me a bit longer, but it's never come up. Sean is super chill. Like Sean Ross Sapp is he's such a good dude, and honestly, my disability has never been an issue.
Number 8.
Number 8 is my interview with Maggie from Coexisting with Rob and Maggie from Fightful and Fightful Overbooked. The reason I like this interview so much is, first of all, I feel like it's the one that really cemented my friendship with Rob Wilkins on Fightful, as I reached out to him and just said, look, I really enjoyed our conversation, man. Would love to talk to your co-host. And he was really, really helpful with that. But also, the reason I love this interview is just how passionate Maggie is about wrestling, how passionate she is about coexisting. In this clip, we talk about how and why she would not want to do coexisting with any other co-host other than Rob Wilkins.
Do you think coexisting would work if you had a different co-host, or if Rob had a different co-host? Or is it the sort of thing where your chemistry, I don't want to lead the question, but your chemistry makes the show, sort of thing?
That's what it is. You said it yourself. I don't want to do coexisting with any other person like Rob. I think we just click together.
Number 7.
Number 7 is my interview with Joe Galley from the National Wrestling Alliance. Again, I love this interview because it was my first time working with a major promotion. We talked about everything from how Joe got into wrestling as a fan, how he became involved with the National Wrestling Alliance, how he just still loves wrestling even though he now works in that industry. Here is a clip from that interview to show you some of the highlights.
Jim Cornette in the time that you got to?
A lot. Oh my gosh, a lot. I mean, I have to tell you, I mean, anybody who listens to his podcast knows how much of an encyclopedia of professional wrestling Jim Cornette is. And he is a controversial figure and says controversial things. And that's sort of how he's been successful. And, you know, has his own little castle of, you know, with a museum of all kinds of stuff that's going on. And that's why he's been able to be so successful in this arena of podcasting as well.
Number 6.
Number 6 is my interview with Kenny McIntosh. I think the reason from Inside the Ropes, I think the reason I enjoy this interview so much is the fact that Kenny doesn't do a lot of them. And he opened up a lot about mental health and the reason he had to take a break from Inside the Ropes during the pandemic. The fact that he was unsure if they were going to tour again, how he felt like if they didn't tour again, what his legacy would be, and if he'd be happy with the tours that he's been able to put together. Here is a clip from that interview to show you some of the highlights.
It was just to do with the whole delegation thing that we talked about earlier, about I hadn't delegated enough stuff, and there was just loads of stuff happening, and it just was like a boiling point that I was just like, I can't do this right now.
Number 5.
Number 5 is my interview with Ellie Littlechild from What Culture. The reason I feel like I love this interview is because there's no wrestling talk. Because we just talked about the fact that Ellie is not a wrestling fan, and the fact that we talked about how she basically wants to pursue acting and her hopes that how she uses her acting skills in her work with What Culture, how she now blends the two, and things like that, really. But I think the reason I love this interview is also the response it's got. With just being a wrestling channel, guys, I thought that one wasn't going to do very well. But I really enjoyed just hearing a different perspective on media and how things can change and things like that. Here is a highlight clip from that interview.
I think this for me is a big step in the direction I want to be going in. And obviously acting is a career that people are going to see. But to me, this is a more professional thing to be doing than filming TikToks in your bedroom. And that's the difference.
Number 4.
Number 4 is my interview with Will Washington from Grapsody. Again, I love this interview, guys, because I'm a big fan of the Grapsody boys. Phil, Lindsay, Righteous Reg, and of course Will Washington. And I'm actually very proud of the fact that I've been able to have all 3 members on this year to discuss their wrestling fandom and stuff. But the reason I rank my Will one so highly is due to the fact that he opened up about a lot in that interview. Specifically the fact of why he left RBR Wrestling and the fact that he wanted his kids to be proud of the content he was making, and he felt like he wasn't at that time. Here in this clip, he discusses why he is now proud of what the content that he makes and why he's happy for his kids to see it.
100%. I think my kids know all my content. My daughter's watched Grapsody before, and she's especially watched the interviews because she's a big fan of Jade Cargill. She's a big fan of Red Velvet, and we of course had them both on the show. So that's always been kind of cool. And again, I do Day After Dynamite, and that is a show again where it's not to say everything on the show is positive, but I approach it from the standpoint of, look, I'm watching a show I like. I'm not going to like everything, but I am at least going to really accentuate the stuff that we do like, because that's what the show is there for.
Number 3
is my interview with Joe Holbert, formerly of Fightful, now of The Late Night Grin. Again, I love this interview because I feel like it was the first interview where I realised headlines make views. So we started out by discussing Joe's fandom, but of course at this time he'd left Fightful, so we discussed why he ultimately decided to leave Fightful and where he feels like he went wrong with his departure, things he would change, things he feels like his co-hosts might change. Here is a highlight clip from that interview to show you what I'm talking about.
Jeremy had an amazing ability to talk about stuff that was sensitive, that was nuanced, and he would tackle it in a way that was so different to what you usually see on wrestling podcasts.
Number 2.
Number 2 is my interview with Alex McCarthy from Mail Sports, formerly of TalkSport. As you guys know, in 2021, I was lucky enough to interview Alex McCarthy, and it was always an interview that I'd love to have done again because I felt like I improved as an interviewer. So when he tweeted out that he was no longer with TalkSport, I just reached out to him and said, look, I'd love to reach you to tell your story. And he took me up on it. And I love how open he was about why he left TalkSport, why Wrestling Daily came to an end, why when he joined Inside the Ropes to do Monday Night Live, he would only have done it if Sati Niangi and Wyatt and SP3 would have done it with him, otherwise he wouldn't have done it. Why he now feels like he can be more of a fan because he doesn't cover wrestling in his shoot job, and just where he see. And the thing that I love as well is the fact that he said, you guys know the question I end all my interviews on is with YouTube, with podcasting, with social media in general. I asked my guest what a piece of content they want to be remembered for, and he was very open about the fact that he doesn't give a shit about the content side of it. He just wants his kids to remember him as a good father. That choked me up, if I'm honest, guys. But here is a highlight clip from that interview to show you guys some of the highlights.
I think it's a video that lives on. Like, again, it hasn't really changed. I would love my girls just to know that I was pretty good at what I did.
Number 1.
One drum roll, editor, is my interview with Jason Solomon from the Solomonster Sound Off. I think the reason I'm so happy with this interview is A, because I felt like we got a lot of amazing content out of it, but B, also because of the fact that I reached out to Jason earlier in the year before we filmed the interview, and he was like, sorry, not right now. But this was the interview that I really pursued in a nice way and was like, whenever you're free, I'd love to have you on. And finally a spot opened up and he came on and we were able to have a really good conversation. I love that we were able to talk about his early days as a content creator when he wasn't that fussed on being consistent, but he realised to grow his channel he had to be consistent, and why now he is consistent, how he stays consistent and motivated. And the other thing we talked about as well is if he was to join a major podcast network, how that conversation would go about wanting to not basically be, wanting it to still be his vision, I'll put it that way. And yeah, so yeah, that's why it's my number 1 interview. Basically, what do you do to motivate yourself on days that you're like, I really can't be asked to do this today?
I think I just say to myself, look, I have an audience for this that are waiting for this show. I have sponsors of my own. And so nearly every week there's some sort of sponsor that I'm working with and I have to, talk about that. And I don't have the option, even if I wanted to, of saying, you know what, I'm not going to do a show this week, because then they're not going to be a sponsor for very long.
Fair enough.
So I have responsibilities now that I wouldn't have had 5, 10, 12 years ago when the show was still in its infancy.
So there you go, guys. That is my top 10 interviews of 2022. Let me know your favourites in the comments below. Interviews maybe that went under the radar, interviews you enjoyed, just stuff like that really. But also comment down below who you want to see interviewed in 2023. Either someone I've interviewed in the past that you love me to have another conversation with about a topic, or someone that I haven't interviewed that you just love to see. And anyway, guys, I will see you in the next one. Make sure you like, share and subscribe. Follow me on Twitter @TomTalksRash, and I will see you in the next one. A goodbye.